Oh, if you're like me, you're very excited to know where we're going today. We're back in Zechariah chapter 8, kind of taking off from verse 9 and where that corresponds in Haggai, or Haggai, as Christians usually say it, however it works, or the
Big time.
English Christians say it. Um, anyway, these are amazing, amazing verses by the two prophets at that time. And so, with that said, Rabbi, let's go.
Okay, and of course, prophets at that time, and with a message to that time, but also a message for all of us.
Absolutely.
And again, bearing in mind the particular circumstances, because as we always keep on noting, you can't even get to the starting gate in understanding the prophets if you don't understand what they're saying in their time, in their place, in their set of circumstances, and to their audience. Just that's only the starting gate. Then we need to ask, and what's in it for us? That is, where's the message that pertains to each and every one of us? So, first, in addressing that initial set of questions in their time, in their place, in their set of circumstances to their audience, both prophets are prophesying at the beginning of the Second Temple period. In both of these prophecies, before the Second Temple period per se, because they are, I guess you could say, needling the people, get to work, build the house, lay the foundations of the house of the Lord. And you see the correspondence between these two prophecies. In both instances, these are prophecies of, I suppose I would describe it as, of rebuke and promise. Rebuke, you're not doing anything. Get to work. Promise. The moment that you stop being a bump on a log, the moment you do get to work, everything's going to change. And inevitably, when you consider these words, the obvious question that keeps on gnawing at us is, why didn't they get it? Why does the prophet need to keep on pushing to get results? And that inevitably is going to have to segue into, do we get it? And what we need to do also in order to heed the summons. And it's obviously going to be understood on a much more expansive plane than the particular summons that pertained, again, in their time, in their place, in their set of circumstances, laying the foundation of the house of the Lord. Because laying the house of the Lord is something far, far broader than only the house of the Lord. It includes that, without any question. We are definitely looking forward to the renewed, rebuilt house of the Lord. And we pray in earnest that we're going to be building it together shoulder to shoulder. It's not only the house of the Lord that's at stake. It is altogether an attitude with respect to, what are we in this world to do? And how do we relate to the impediments that we encounter in that mission? So, of course, on this plane, we began last time by considering what Zechariah is saying. And again, it starts off on a positive note, but there's also the rebuke. In chapter 8 of Zechariah, from verse 9 and on, so said the Lord of hosts, let your hands be strong. You hear in these days these words from the mouth of the prophets that were prophesying in the day that the foundation of the house of the Lord of hosts was laid, even the temple, that it might be built. For behold, before those days, there was no hire for man, neither was there any hire for beast. For him that went out or came in, there was no peace because of the adversary, and I would incite all men, each one against his neighbor. Disaster. Nothing is working. But now, I am not the same to the remnant of this people as in the early days, says the Lord of hosts. For the sowing is for peace. The vine shall give forth its fruit. The earth shall give forth its produce. The heavens shall give forth their dew. And I will cause the remnant of this people to inherit all these. And it will come to pass that just as you were a curse among the nations, O house of Judah and house of Israel, so I will save you, and you shall be a blessing. Fear not. May your hands be strengthened. So you get the sense of, note the, let your hands be strong on the one hand, may your hands be strengthened on the other hand. The same formulation actually in the Hebrew, it's exactly the same words, techezakna yedechem. And in the middle, look where you are, look where you're coming from, look where you need to get to. And again, the same theme we see in Haggai, and I'm going to focus in particular from verse 6 of the first chapter. You have sown much, you bring in little. You eat without being satiated. You drink without getting your fill. You dress, it has no warmth. He that profits into a bundle with holes, so everything just pours right out. And then the summons, get to work. So said the Lord of hosts, consider your ways, ascend the mountain, bring wood, and build the house, and I will accept it, and I will be honored, says the Lord. You looked for much, behold, it became little. You brought it home, and I will blow into it. Because of what? Because of my house that is lying in ruins. Yet you run each to his house. You're distracted. Therefore, because of you, the heavens have kept back, so that there is no dew, and the earth has kept back its produce. And I called for a drought upon the land, and upon the mountains, and upon the grain, and upon the wine, and upon the oil, upon everything that the ground will bring forth, upon man and upon beast, upon all the labor in their hands. And again, same theme. You're toiling away and getting nowhere. And what's it all about? It's all about this. Getting to work, laying the foundation of the house of the Lord. So if I can revert to one critical dimension that Pastor Robbie, you and I discussed over the course of the last few days. You sent me a really important question. What's the business with the wood? Get wood. Why specifically wood? And I cited two passages in particular about wood that we read in Isaiah chapter 60, verse 17. There's a very clear progression among the 6 materials that are cited in the verse. Instead of brass, I will bring gold. Instead of iron, I will bring silver. Instead of wood, brass. Instead of stones, iron. I will also make your officers peace and your taskmasters righteousness. Violence shall be no more heard in you, and wasting nor destruction within your borders. But you shall call your walls salvation and your gates praise. So there's a progression here. And how does it start out? The base materials of the wood and the stone. Arguably, wood even more base. It starts small, really small. We also consider the contrast in King Solomon's song, the Song of Songs, chapter 8, verse 9, between a silver turret and a cedar board. And in our tradition, there is a veiled allusion to the inferiority of the latter, of the cedar board, wood. Silver lasts, wood rots. Really, nothing particularly auspicious. But you know what? It's a start. It's a start in that enterprise of building. And simultaneously, I need to note an additional dimension. And, ironically, in a way, I'm noting this additional dimension, which is a real downer. And this is something that you won't see in any translation of Haggai chapter 1, verse 8, because it pertains to a subtlety that distinguishes the Masoretic text, the manner in which the Bible is written, and the manner in which it is read. This is the sort of thing that happens rarely, but on a number of occasions throughout the Bible, that there is a departure between the manner in which the text is written in Hebrew and the way it's read in Hebrew. And the distinction pertains to, in the Hebrew, the word ve'ekaveda. I will be honored, I will be glorified. I will accept whatever you're bringing, this wood. I'll be glorified through it. And that's the way it's read, but the written text is written deficiently. So the Hebrew experts will note that in the reading of the text, the final letter is the letter Hey. And in the written text, the Hey is missing. And I'm stressing this point, Pastor Avi, because this is something that actually emerged in our conversation maybe a couple of weeks ago. The difference between the first temple and the second temple. And how critically deficient the second temple was on manifold planes. And that missing Hey in our tradition intimates the critical lacunas that had been in the first temple and that were missing in the second. The letter Hey, of course, is the fifth letter of the alphabet. I mean, real alphabet.
Right.
Hebrew alphabet. And it intimates 5 dimensions of deficiency. And of course, the greatest among them, Shekhinah, God's presence that was manifest in the first temple period and was not manifest in the second temple period. And again, I reiterate that when you read this into chapter 1, verse 8 in Haggai, boy, it sounds depressing. That is, ascend the mountain, bring the wood, build the house. I will accept it, be honored. Somewhat.
Part of the reason that I'm intrigued by the whole thing because I'm thinking, okay, this is because you mentioned the greater implication of it is we are to ourselves with our own lives begin to build God's house, the place of tabernacling, the place where we meet with God, and we're supposed to ascend the mountain, which clearly is moving up, and then clearly, what does that wood look like in my own life that I'm going to bring in order to build this? And in that,
Climb.
right, climb, and in that process, and climb with a load, which is different than just climbing, without a load.
Mm-hmm.
No doubt that Isaac carried wood up Mount Moriah. And in our faith, Jesus carried his cross, also made of wood. And I noted those two fascinatingly. And I also noted that Abraham carried the fire. Isaac carried the wood. Again, this was, for the sacrifice that the Lord would provide the lamb, right? And so I was wondering if that has any significance from your perspective as far as the wood that Isaac carried up the mount.
Look, to focus very rigorously on the text, that dialogue so fraught between Abraham and Isaac on the way up to Mount Moriah. They've left the two youths and the donkey behind. They're on their own. And we read as the prelude to the dialogue in Genesis chapter 22, verse 6, Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering and laid it upon Isaac his son. And he took the fire in his hand and the knife. And they went both of them together. And Isaac spoke to Abraham his father and said, "My father." He said, "Here I am, my son." And he said, "Behold the fire and the wood. But where's the lamb for burnt offering?" And Abraham said, and here I'm going to focus on the Hebrew. We have not only the Masoretic text, but the tropes that serve as this intricate system of punctuation. And the punctuation dictates reading Abraham's answer. Elohim yir'eh lo haseh le'olah b'ni. God will see for himself the lamb, semicolon, for a burnt offering, my son. Not as we might have thought to punctuate the text. And the implicit message is, well, God will see for himself a lamb for the burnt offering. My son is the burnt offering. And Isaac gets it. He understands what that answer means. And then the three closing words of verse 8, which are identical to the three closing words of verse 6. And they went, both of them, together. Verse 6 is when Isaac hasn't a clue. Verse 8, he got it. And they're still going, both of them together. That is not that Abraham is engaging in any kind of ruse. In our tradition, Isaac was a youngster, 37 years old at this point. He's 37 and his father is 137 because his father was 100 years old when he was born. Certainly, Isaac is not going to be bound by force by his 137-year-old father. Isaac appreciates where he is heading. And he's carrying the wood. And inevitably, on some plane, we appreciate wood signifies all sorts of things. It's material that can be used for building. It's material that can be used for burning. It is, ironically, in biblical Hebrew, a word that means the tree that is growing and the wood that is chopped down. Same word. It is a point of linguistic subtlety that in post-biblical Hebrew, in order to deal with this profound ambiguity, another word was imported from Aramaic to refer to tree as opposed to wood. But in biblical Hebrew, there's no such division. It's one word. So just consider what that means as well. The tree that is growing and the wood from the tree that has already been cut down. It's one word. Maybe recognizing the extent to which life, in all of its profound complexities, hails from and ultimately converges back to an all-encompassing, ineffable unity. That's also part of the message of tree/wood, of Eitz. And there's that simplicity. Again, nothing extravagant. And once again, consider what's taking place in this summons in the eighth verse of the prophecy of Haggai.
Well, just to back up for a second, because I just want to highlight something you said to make sure it was clear for me, but also probably for the audience. Is that when you had delineated that verse to say, essentially, and I should have quoted it sooner before it slipped my mind, but essentially you were saying that the Lord will see for himself, semicolon, a lamb, my son, meaning
A lamb is part of the phrase, but then for burnt offering, my son, that's one
a
phrase.
burnt offering, my son. There you go.
God will choose the lamb, and that may equate with the next phrase, which is for burnt offering, my son.
So at that point in time, Isaac knew that he was the lamb that Abraham perceived to be the sacrifice at that particular moment in time. So, like you said, Isaac was completely aware and still went, with his father, as you said, the 100-year-old and the 137-year-old, and
37-year-old and 137-year-old.
37-year-old and 137-year-old. So they're, and that 137 is climbing.
They're both climbing. Oh boy, they're both climbing. And I don't just mean in altitude.
And then, the beauty of the word wood in Hebrew, from my perspective, it is that last letter, the Zadi, has this sense of righteousness with it, as in trees always head towards the sun. It's at a right angle, however you want to put it. It's a picture of, right. And as I was studying this wood thing, because I just went like I got to, and I noted that the bronze altar itself was made of this, I don't know how you pronounce it, wood. It's this very specific kind of wood that had to be made, but then it was overlaid with bronze, which you think about that. Here's this unbelievably hot altar, but in and of itself, inside was wood that was covered with bronze, which is a little bit miraculous to begin with. How in the world did the altar not burn?
Brass, to be precise, but same idea. And you're right, a very thin layer, and indeed, this is seen in our tradition as a symbol that when you are connected with God's word, then, if you will, much as the burning bush, you're on fire, but you are not consumed.
Oh, oh wow, oh wow.
Jeremiah tells us in God's name that my word is like fire. So connecting with God's word is connecting with fire. It's connecting with fire, and it sets us on fire, but we are not consumed.
Yeah, that alone was just something to sit there and marvel at. So our whole church went up to Boone, North Carolina, which is sort of a mountain resort, and we carried all this wood this weekend, to have a fire up there. Is you know, and there's something about a campfire. Anybody, and obviously, if out there in the wilderness, they had one gigantic, huge one with a bronze altar, and it was the fire of God Himself that came down from heaven. And you think about all that. When I woke up yesterday morning, literally there were these big, beautiful pine trees. I don't know if there's some kind of cross with cypress, but they're holding out their arms like they were worshiping God. They, rather than the branches going down, they actually were holding up like they were worshiping. And I was just looking at the trees and marveling at this wood, which I knew, as you said, that those trees are as wood as the wood that had been cut down or had made into a board. In that Song of Solomon passage, I have spent literally hours and hours and hours on that particular, trying to grasp this idea of the silver turrets and the cedar panels of wood, which are tables, which are interestingly the same word that is used as the tables of the Ten Commandments. Or it's the same word,
Look, right?
but it's not. Obviously, these are wood, not the stone. But anyway, the whole idea is just fraught with symbolism and meaning. And when he said, "Go up the mountain and bring wood," like, there is such an opportunity for our souls, I think.
And yet, simultaneously, what maybe makes this summons so profound is, number one, nothing extravagant, just wood. Number two, I will be glorified, asterisk. It's only going to be to a limited degree. You're not right now getting to the ultimate. You're producing, again, placing it in the literal context of time, place, circumstances, this temple that's being built, you are producing an extremely modest structure. How modest? Modest enough that we read in the 3rd chapter of Ezra that the old folks remember the first temple, saw this temple, the second temple, and everyone else is celebrating because it's finally built, and they're weeping because this is it. And I mean, the formulation that we read in Ezra is so telling and really so profoundly fraught. In chapter 3, verses 12 and 13, many of the priests and Levites and heads of fathers' houses, the old men that had seen the first house standing on its foundation, wept with a loud voice when this house was before their eyes. And many shouted aloud for joy because they hadn't seen the first temple. They didn't have anything to compare with. So the people could not discern the noise of the shout of joy from the noise of the weeping of the people. Imagine. Yeah, this, it must sound like thunder. But if you listen carefully, this thunder has two voices: the noise of the shout of joy and the noise of the weeping of the people. And still, what's the injunction of both Haggai and Zechariah? Just do it. Is it the ultimate? No, it's a starting point. Maybe to vary the metaphor, I'll say it's a beachhead. Think Normandy invasion. How many brave soldiers gave their lives on those beaches? And simultaneously, well, that beginning was just so fraught. So many stories of heroism and tragedy. So many fields and fields of graves. I'm sure we've all seen the pictures. And that was the first step towards victory. Now, that doesn't compute very easily in our minds. Ultimately, of course, we see the totality of life in this world as merely a very small interval, kind of like you have this vast electromagnetic spectrum and there's this tiny little window that's visible light, and all the rest you don't see. And so too, life in this world is just that tiny little sliver in a continuum that is everlasting, eternal, infinite. But very much along the lines of what we discussed a couple of weeks ago, with respect to it's incremental. We're not comparing against the absolute. We're recognizing that every step taken is significant. Every step taken, just get to work and get some wood down from the mountain. How much wood? I don't know. Some people had arthritic backs. They weren't able to carry a whole lot, Okay, fine. We'll deal with it. One small step, little by little. And it's significant. And it's significant even though you're not going to see the final outcome. You're not going to see the utmost realization. You're not going to see the glory in all of its majesty manifest before your eyes. And yes, there'll be people who will look at it and they'll be weeping because this is all we've got. And simultaneously that summons, and oh boy, I wish I could hear what I'm saying right now, by the way. Listen to it, really seriously. You have this glass and it's not full. And it's not half full. There are a couple of drops of water smeared along the bottom. It's not completely dry. And that needs to be the focus of your attention. It's not empty. It's something. Do it. And here's the rub. This is maybe on a practical day-to-day plane, one of the most important take-home messages. With respect to that common theme that we saw in both prophets' words, until you got to work in building the house of the Lord, you are a walking, breathing disaster. Everything that you did was a failure. You sow much, you bring in little. You plant vineyards, nothing to drink. Even when you do get something, it doesn't satisfy. You eat and you're not satisfied. You drink, you haven't drunk your full. It's a real disaster. And what that essentially signifies is on the most mundane plane, but maybe simultaneously the most profound plane. What's happening in your lives is just a material reflection of what's happening in your spiritual lives. Because maybe you're thinking about some ultimate something or other, and you're missing the point. Just roll up your sleeves, literal or metaphorical, and get to work. And all of a sudden you'll see, I'm accomplishing something. Whereas until that moment that I dedicate myself to building the house of the Lord, I'm accomplishing an awful lot of nothing. Back and forth, this and that, and what it all amounts to is one huge zero. Just get to work. And what inevitably comes to my mind in this vein is the supplication that inevitably resonates with what we read as a promise in Isaiah chapter 65, where there is a description of restoration. I'll start reading from verse 17. Behold, I create new heavens and a new earth. The former things shall not be remembered, nor come to mind. But be glad and rejoice forever in that which I create. For behold, I create Jerusalem a rejoicing, and her people a joy. And I will rejoice in Jerusalem, and joy in my people, and the voice of weeping shall be no more heard in her, nor the voice of crying. And it is a description of extraordinary longevity in verse 20. The youngest shall die 100 years old. In verse 21, and they shall build houses and inhabit them, and they shall plant vineyards and eat the fruit of them. Note the exact antithesis of what Haggai and Zechariah are describing. They shall not build and another inhabit. They shall not plant and another eat. For as the days of a tree shall be the days of my people. Tree lasts a long time. It's also the word for wood. It's the same word. And my chosen ones shall wear out the work of their hands. They will outlast the work of their hands. And here's the critical culmination. They shall not labor in vain, nor bring forth for consternation. For they are the seed of the blessed of the Lord, and their offspring with them. And the culmination, and it shall come to pass that before they call, I will answer, and while they are yet speaking, I will hear. And then, of course, you also get the wolf and the lamb shall feed together, the lion shall eat straw like the ox, and so on. A fixed up world. How do you get there? One step at a time.
Yeah, just do it. It's sort of like the Nike passage. But I hate we're out of time again. It gave you once again. You've given me, oh man, so much. And the one that I know it just has my heart. Is it burns, but it isn't consumed, and that idea of the brass covering on that wood of the altar is just like, oh my. And as we get to work, our hearts get a chance to burn and just see what he's doing in like whatever small beginnings, like that verse that don't despise the place of small beginnings, right? And don't it's the same idea. So beautiful. Well, I we have got to go, but what an episode. What an episode.
If I could just add one crucial postscript.
Please.
Again, reiterate, this definitely applies in our day and age. We are also waiting, yearning to build the house of the Lord in Jerusalem. We're not making any bones or apologies about it. That's the goal. But simultaneously, there's also that element that in each and every one of us, we need to build a house to the Lord. In Psalm 27, and I have to note Psalm 27 in particular because, in the month of Elul, 6th month, we recite Psalm 27 every morning and every evening. And in Psalm 27, David gives us an interesting formulation. There is one one request that I ask of the Lord. This I ask. And what is he asking? To dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life. Now, what exactly did he mean by that? The temple wasn't built yet. To dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life? And maybe on the most basic plane, that I should be able to make a space in my life wherever I go, whatever I'm doing. I'm dwelling in the house of the Lord because I'm making my space, sacred space, that is dedicated to God. And it's going to find its expression on all sorts of levels, not necessarily architectural, but meaningful. To have that consciousness that I'm dwelling in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, because wherever I'm going, I am making it into the house of the Lord. So, inevitable on that plane to appreciate that additional dimension. I also can't help but note here, and maybe it is indeed of profound significance, that when we consider when this prophecy of Haggai is being given, the opening verse of the prophecy of Haggai in the second year of King Darius, in the 6th month. That's this month, on the first day of the month. As this is a message for this month of getting ready to dwell in the house of the Lord. Now, of course, this is a message that applies all year round, no question about it. But maybe it's particularly apropos, particularly germane for us to consider the message. Yeah, we got to get ready. We have to dedicate ourselves to making this world into a bastion in which God's presence will be felt. We're missing that.
Beautiful. That's, yes, thank you. Amazing. And, similar to the way he ends the 23rd Psalm, right? And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. It's yes. Shalom, my friend. I'm so very grateful for this.
Me too, of course. Shalom from Jerusalem.